למד כל הירושלמי. איפה הבחור?
הוא היה לפני החתונה של הרב.
רוצה לשים על כל ירושלמי, רוצה פה, שלא יצלוח,
לפני החתונה.
Today we are getting into the amazing history and story of Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair, one of the great saints of Judaism. These are your forefathers. These are people that you should know about. You should know these stories. Every Jew should know these stories. This is your heritage. Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair went and refined himself to such a level that amazing things were happening for him within the regards of divine providence and divine help. Also, his material things that he owned was more elevated. Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair was a Tana. He was not one of the Zugot. He's not at the level of a prophet. He's not at the level of one of the judges of Israel in the earlier times. Nonetheless, he knew the Halachot very, very well. And he was actively engaged in pursuing holiness, making himself holy. And even though he was in a much later generation, the days of prophets have left at this point, he had amazing gifts and benefits. And these stories are here for you because you can also get the same kinds of benefits, the same sorts of experiences. The Gemara says, thieves stole the donkey of Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair at night, and they kept it in hiding with them for 3 days, during which the donkey did not eat a thing. They tried to feed him, in other words, says a Yafei Marah, and he would not eat the fodder or the animal food that they were trying to feed him. The Gemara says after 3 days, they decided to return the donkey to its master, and they said, let us send it off to its master, or it will die among us, and it will make a rotting corpse in our cave. It'll foul the cave. The Gemara continues and says they took it out, and it went and it stood at the gate of its master, and it began to bray. And Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair said to his servants, open up for this poor creature, that it has gone 3 days without tasting a thing. The Yafei Marah says about this that the righteous Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair knew the nature of his animal, and that it would eat only that which was completely permitted. Not only is this donkey careful about not eating potentially stolen goods, he's also not going to eat the food that was not tithed properly. How amazing is that? And again, that's going to be a thing where Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair becomes so elevated by doing Torah and mitzvot and Torah learning at a very exact and high level that the material things that he owns ends up becoming more refined as well. Not only do you become more refined and your body becomes more refined, the material things in your possession also become elevated, so that you see a difference between this donkey and you see a difference between a regular donkey. The Gemara continues, they opened up the gate for the donkey and it entered. And Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair said to them, let it be given something to eat. And they gave it barley, but they did not want to eat it. They said, our teacher, it does not want to eat. And he said to them, have the barley corns been rectified? And his men were thinking, perhaps he's asking whether they removed pebbles or dirt that might have gotten mixed into the barley. He says to them, no, let me make it clear. And have you removed the maestros of its Demai status? In other words, he's saying, did you take out the proper chain of tithes? And when you are a Jew, you have to eat food that is holy. It's not just eating food that has a higher level of kashrus. It's also where the tithes are properly taken out. It is a diet that will get you closer to the Holy One. You will experience a world where you can see the hand of God clearly. The more holy you make yourself, the more you can see the workings of heaven and the way things are put together by HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how HaShem is running the world. These workers replied back to Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair and they said, but has the teacher not taught us the Mishnah? It says, if one purchases produce to feed the animals, it is exempt from the Demai obligation. And here, this is going to be Demai barley that was purchased for animal food. It should be exempt from tithes. And he said to them, "You are correct according to the letter of the law. However, what can we do with this poor creature because it is excessively stringent upon itself?" They removed the maestros and afterward it ate. Demai for food for animals does not need to have this separation taken out, and nonetheless it will not eat it unless it has had it taken out. We're going to get into another story of Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair. Two people came to a city to seek work, and the Gemara says that two paupers deposited 2 seah of barley with Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair. They gave it to him to hold and to watch. They forgot about the barley and they went away. And in the meantime, Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair planted the barley, harvested it, brought it into storage every year. 7 years later, the men returned and they wanted to take back the barley. And Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair said to them, "Bring camels and donkeys to take your barley." In other words, you have to love your fellow Jew, and you have to love the property of your fellow Jew. This is like Shulchas Aveda, where a Jew lost their property and you have to return it to them. But meanwhile, when they come to collect it until you have to return it, you have to guard their property. You have to guard it. That is one of the biblical laws. One of the key things about this is that everyone who's connected to a tzaddik is going to see more blessing in your life. And that is why you have to find out and seek out the Gedolei Yisrael. You will know that by looking at the Hasidic dynasties, who are going to be the great leaders. And if you are Sephardi, go seek out the great Sephardi leaders, Gedolim, who are recognized as the great Sephardi Torah scholars. Go seek them out. Get a relationship with them. Go get brachas for them. And if you're just regular Ashkenazic, leaders of the Lithuanian Orthodox community, go seek them out. The barley that was being held by Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair was at an elevated state because he was the guardian of it. And so he planted it and it increased in yield. HaShem blessed the barley of these poor people through the Gadol, Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair. Very important to seek out the Gedolim. You want to go with their hashkafa and you want to go with their rulings because these are the leaders of the Jewish people. There's another story with Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair. Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair went to a certain place and the residents came to him and they said to him, "The mice are eating all of our grain." And Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair pronounced a decree on the mice and he gathered all the mice together. In other words, all the mice came and they listened. The Gemara continues, and they began squeaking. And Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair said to the residents, "Do you know what they said?" And the residents of the town said, "No." And he said to the residents, "They are saying that the grain has not had its maestros removed." In other words, this is going to be a halachic requirement to have the tithes taken out, and they did not take out from grain. So he says, "Do you wish to guarantee me that if you take out the maestros properly, from now on, the mice will not eat your grain anymore?" So what's going on here? The grain has become subject to becoming more coarse and having less divine providence shining on it. And the residents who owned that grain also descended and had less divine providence because they were not separating out the tithes properly. Keep in mind, every mitzvah is a reflection of divine will. Divine will is to have maestros removed properly. And so what happens is when you don't do it, you descend. And again, the material things that you own become more coarse. They become more subject to all of the curses that come when you have more zoamar. Zoamar is going to be rot and decay that comes from TUMAH, that comes into material when there is not going to be observance of HALACHOT, when there's not going to be where you are following the HALACHOT. So what happens here, the grain ends up where it gets subject to decay and destruction. It comes about in the way where it happens to be mice destroying the property. The property of these people who are at a lower spiritual level starts to get destroyed. And that is something that you need to understand as a Jew in your life. When you don't make yourself more holy, and when you start not observing the laws, the material things that come into your life come in a degraded way. So, for example, when you are a husband and a wife, and you don't have it where you're going to the mikvah, which is following the laws of purity, and then you go and you make a child. The child that you made is going to be at a lower spiritual level, and that child is always going to have to work harder to elevate himself because he is born in a slightly degraded way. When a woman who's married goes and has relations and makes a child with a regular Jew who's not the husband, what comes out? A spiritually degraded form. That's going to be a mamzer. These people were not following Torah and mitzvot, and the property that they possessed, the things that they had, ended up being more subject to Zoamar. It's very important to do Torah and mitzvot because you can elevate the spiritual things that come from you and your possessions. Your possessions will have more blessing. The Gemara continues and it says, the residents of the town guaranteed that they were going to remove the maestros, and they asked for Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair to guarantee us. And Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair guaranteed them and said that the mice will no longer diminish the stores of grain. And why is that? Because Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair knows how the heavens are working. He knows that when Jews are following the Torah and they are following it accurately, they are following the will of HaShem. The Torah and the mitzvot are a reflection of the divine will. They are there for you to follow, and when you follow them, you will be at a higher spiritual level and you will get more divine providence. And when you have more divine providence, the material things that you own will produce better. So he already knows that this is a fact of how the universe works for a Jew. We live in a world today where everybody wants to make the Jews like all the other nations, and we have to resist that. We are Hashem's nation. We are a unique nation. We are not like the regular nations. We should not be like them in economics. We should not be like them in family structure. We should not be like the rest of the nations in terms of following their fads and their ideas. We should follow the Torah and the mitzvot and only rely on Hashem. Why? Because we have a covenant with Hashem, and Hashem is going to give us a special treasure that is only reserved for the Jewish people. And that is this kind of experience which can be for every Jew that makes him or herself holy to Hashem. Have a great day.